Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another bonus episode of the Missing Wolves post-game podcast live stream thing. I'm Andrew Dukowitz, beat reporter for Zone Coverage, covering the Wolves, Lynx, and Gophers women's basketball. And today we got a fun one. John Carter joins me from Noah Basketball. For people who have seen my practice clips that I put up there, that is the very high-tech fancy scoreboard that is talking to the players in the background quite a bit. John, how's it going, man?
Hey, doing great, Andrew. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, absolutely. When I heard that you, I think it was Hope that reached out to some people saying that you'd like to talk about it, I was like, yes, absolutely. So first, I just kind of wanted to ask you, you kind of alluded to it before we got on here, but I did find out that you were an Auburn grad. Who's kind of your favorite Auburn basketball player? Because there's not a ton of them. I'll phrase it that way.
Yeah, I mean, listen, of course, I'm an Auburn guy, so I think there's more than probably you do. But, I tend to love the older players. I'm an older guy. I mean, how can you not be an Auburn fan and not love Charles Barkley? And, he's the guy I always tell people all the time, the guy that can get away with anything. He can say anything and get away with it, where I would probably get just absolutely chastised if I said some of the things that he says. But he's just a guy. But I love Barkley, and then a couple of guys that I really love. They were there when I was a student, and you may not. I know you'll remember Chuck Person, the rifleman. What a shooter and competitor. And then a guy named Chris Morris was someone I was a real fan of. And if you look up Chris, he has some incredible dunks and played in the NBA for 12, 14 years, something like that. So that's probably my top three.
Okay. Chuck Person, he had a long career too. I mean, he was.
Oh yeah, Chuck played for the Pacers. You remember some of those crazy Larry Bird, Chuck Person battles? They had some good ones back in the day. But no, Chuck is incredible. I've worked with him a little bit when he was an assistant at Auburn, and Chuck could stand at nearly half court and shoot and make shots without bending his knees. Almost, I've just never seen anybody quite like him.
I think that's. Since I've gotten into NBA journalism, I think that's been one of the most shocking things, is that these guys really don't miss.
Yeah, when they're practicing, they just it's just crazy. Guys like that have just done it for so long, and and maybe we'll get into that here, but they figured out the science of shooting. Some of them without knowing it, some of them with knowing it.
Well, and you mentioned the science of shooting. You went to Auburn, engineer grad. Was your thought process always to get like an engineering degree and going into something basketball related, or what?
Yeah, engineering. I never had any idea that I would be able to do basketball related stuff. That's for sure. I got an engineering degree to be able to make a living. And I love engineering. I love technical things. I'm one of those kids that tore everything to pieces to figure out why it worked and all those type things. But no, got an engineering degree. And honestly, I went to college. It's interesting how I ended up in college even, but I would have never went to college if farming had not been so terrible when I was in high school. My dad was a farmer.
Oh, sure.
That's what I was planning to do. And then farming was so bad at that time. My mom and dad was both, boy, you really should think about going to college.
And then off to college you went.
Yeah, that's right. And I played a little junior college basketball, and then transferred to Auburn and got my engineering degree and went to work.
Yeah. So what degree in engineering did you get? What is it?
Yeah, I actually have a mechanical engineering degree.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Working on farm equipment all the time. That was kind of something that made sense to me. But then I also, during college and right after college, became a little bit of a software guy. I always enjoyed, coding and development and that type thing. And so that's kind of the two areas that I've spent most of my career in.
So how did the engineering eventually overlap with kind of the shooting science? I'll just paraphrase that, or I'll set you up with that. Is like, I went to school to be a nurse, and my first 11 years in the workforce was as a nurse, and then just somehow it overlapped, and now I'm doing this. But engineering, I feel like, is just about as big of a leap as healthcare to basketball.
Well, here's the thing, and what I tell people all the time, and I've heard our CTO say this as well, is, these elite athletes, these basketball players, they're mathematicians themselves. They don't necessarily realize it, they have to continue. Their brain has to calculate how fast I need to accelerate here, how I need to do this to miss this, to place this pass perfectly. They're doing math all the time. Yeah, they're not doing any any calculus proofs or whatever, but math is all around us, and engineering is all around us. And so I've always kind of had that approach and thinking about things in that way. And I've also just loved basketball. I played and coached basketball up until, I was probably 40. And, I had kids that played basketball and I coached them. And, I just love the game. And I've always just been fascinated with shooting. And so that's really kind of how, and then, to tell you the quick story of Noah, how it started. Yeah. So I was not the original founder. It was a guy named Alan Marty. Alan's a venture capital guy, lives in the Silicon Valley. He's retired now, but he had a daughter that was shooting too flat in middle school. And so that's where the rake attached to the ladder. It's on our website if you maybe saw that. But so he had a rake attached to the ladder and was trying to get his daughter to shoot right over the rake. And, this goes 25 years ago. And at that time, there was no real technology, but he had the idea of, wow, wouldn't it be great if you could give a player feedback without them having to wear anything or shoot through something or over something type thing. And the rake and the ladder didn't work great. And Carly, his daughter, probably was embarrassed in the driveway with her dad doing that. I don't know. But anyway, but that's kind of how it started. And then he and I connected. He was doing his venture world, and I had experience starting small companies and growing companies, and I had a passion for basketball, etc. And I'd thought about some similar things as well. So he and I connected, and we actually moved the company here to Huntsville, Alabama, and we've been here ever since.
So how did kind of the idea sprout up in those early days of using? I mean, it's a pretty high tech system from what I understand. How did that kind of start or get from the rake and the ladder to where it is today?
Yeah, well, it started with, hey, we need to be able to give players feedback on their arc. And the brain is really interesting. What's happening is it's something called proprioceptive training. And if you give your central nervous system or you give your brain feedback like this, it's got to be accurate and it's got to be immediate. If it's not accurate, not immediate, it doesn't work. But if it does, it's amazing what the brain and body can do. And so that was number one. We got to be able, want to be able to give feedback. That was kind of the original light going off. You shoot with a player and you say, hey, that's too flat, shoot it higher. And they might shoot it higher for a few reps, and the coach walks away and they go back to shooting what their muscle memory tells them to shoot, which is flat or whatever. Yeah. And so that's kind of how it started. That was the focus on just being able to do that. And then over time, how the world has changed toward analytics, the whole Moneyball approach and all those type things, and how the game has become so much about shooting. So when I came on board as CEO, I took over everything as far as product development and all those type things. And just went to work of thinking and spending a lot of time with coaches to understand, what do you really want? What do you really need from this product? And over time, it's become we really are not to sound arrogant, but we are the de facto standard in basketball shooting. We have 28 NBA customers, the bulk of the WNBA teams. Last year, we had 7 of the Elite 8. All the Final 4 teams were either the second or third year in a row are NOAA customers. And so, so we've had some really good success, but we've moved way past just giving arc feedback. We now do rim maps, so you can see precisely where you're missing, your left-right position, shot depth. And then one thing that teams love that we do, we provide percentile rankings, so how your left-right consistency compares to other players. And, on an anonymous basis. And so that's been a really big thing as well. And now we have facial recognition. So when players walk in, they just shoot, we automatically tag them. We have now built the world's first fully automated motion capture system, which basically means we can capture joint angles throughout the basketball shot in the practice gym. We already have 3 NBA teams where this is installed. So that's kind of the next big thing for us. Is I want to understand the mechanics. I want to understand what leads to great shooting. Right now, you have a lot of opinions in that particular domain.
So how does the system, again, people who have seen on my social feeds when I'm, for example, like Mike Conley and Bones Highland have a 3-point contest after every practice. And from where we sit or stand as media, the NOAA display is kind of right in the background, and I have fans pretty consistently going, what do the 3 lines mean? Why is the rim there? Like, how does this work? I have a very baseline understanding of just kind of like, Googling stuff, but I figure I'd just ask you, like, in essence, like, what does that backdrop mean when people are shooting, and how does it work?
Yeah. So what you're looking at, we call it a splash board. And so there's 3 numbers there that you probably saw that meter. It looks going down through there. And the perfect shot is 45 degrees. That means it's coming into the rim at 45 degrees. It's 11 inches deep in the basket, so 11 inches past the front of the rim. And just for maybe the people that don't know, the rim is 18 inches. So that's 2 inches past center. It's not the center of the basket. That's not the bullseye. And then the last measurement is the left-right position. And we measure that dynamically for every shot, depending on where they are on the floor. We measure the left-right position based from where they're standing. And so 45, 11, 0, that's the perfect shot. And so when you line those things up, and you might have noticed we've got this green band, it looks like a ditch. If you stay out of the ditches, 43 to 47, 8 to 14, -3 to +3. Basically, it scores every time if you're in that zone. And so that's what guys are doing. That's what people are doing throughout basketball now, NBA, WNBA, college, etc. And so how we do it. So what we do, we have a depth sensor that's mounted up above. Next time you're in there, you can look above the hoop, and you'll see a big bank of sensors. And we have one sensor that tracks the ball. And so that's where we get the entry angle, the shot depth, and the left-right position. And then we also have a bank of cameras. These are 4K cameras that we use to grab video clips of every shot. And from those video clips, we do facial recognition. And that's got way, way better over time. And so now we can basically automatically tag shots. So if you got a 3-player workout going on or something like that, we can tag the data without anyone having to do anything. Everything we have built, we learned some lessons on this, is nobody has to touch a button. That's number one.
And when you say immediate, I mean, it is pretty much by the time the ball is through the net and being rebounded, there's already a score up on that.
Oh, yeah.
On that NOAA board. I've covered the Wolves for a couple of years now, but last year I remember doing a scrum with Mike, and like mid scrum, we just heard Nickeil Alexander-Walker screaming from the back of kind of the gym. He always practiced kind of in like the far one, hidden from the media, and just a screaming from Nickeil. And then he came running over to the scrum to tell Mike that he had hit a perfect shot. And as Nickeil kind of like went wandering off and, hugged the people on his way back to shooting, Mike just kind of like shook his head and goes like, I think I hit like 2 of those every day, but for him, I guess that's good for him. Like, how hard is it for an athlete to hit?
I would say it's,
you would have thought he hit like his significant other gave birth or something with how he reacted.
I love that. That does my heart good. That's cool. But we get a lot of pictures. Like our NBA and our Division I college guy will send me pictures all the time, and it's basically a picture of an NBA, WNBA, or a college player that's standing in front of the board, and they're pointing up like this because they can and we love getting those. But yeah, it's kind of a cool thing to get a perfect shot. So basically, what that means, so Andrew, what we do, we round it. So that means the arc had to be between 44.5 and 45.5. The depth had to be between 10.5 and 11.5, and -0.5 and +0.5 inches. It's really hard to get. I would say, a really good shooter, like someone like Mike, he'd probably get on a good workout, he would get several, I would guess 2 to 5. Me, I'm a pretty good shooter from the mid range. I'm an old guy, but I still like to shoot a lot. If I do a 300 shot workout, I typically get 2 or 3. And I'm really focused on it. Obviously, I'm trying to. But yeah. So 1%, 2% for someone is that's having a really good day. But what that does though is they're chasing that perfection to hit that. They're going to get a ton of shots that are in that band that I just talked about and stay out of the ditches. They're going to be a 43 and a 13 and a -2, and those shots are going to score, and they're going to count just as much if it was a perfect shot.
I mean, the psychology of it is I've been kind of fascinated by too as I'm listening to you, because I'm thinking like, yeah, that is just Pavlov's dog at its essence of you give them a green and you label it perfect, and every NBA professional athlete is always chasing that. I guess, like, do you see, and I know you can't go into specifics, but kind of what's the like proof of concept, I guess, of like, if you're using Noah, like how do you see kind of like a gradual increase in shooting percentages over year, or is it more of a, people have to really buy into it?
It's very player dependent.
Mhm.
Let me think of one I can say here that's been written about. I mean, as an example, a player named Isaac Okoro came out of Auburn. That's the reason I know that name a little bit more on the tip of my tongue. But Isaac was
right? If I remember right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he was a flat ball shooter, coming out of Auburn, but he still had good mechanics and all those type things. Great defender, and basically there was a couple of stories in the local papers in Cleveland about his growth, and basically he went like 32 to 34 to 36 to 30. He just continued to improve each year as he raised his arc and built consistency around that. And of course, as he got more comfortable playing in NBA games and the speed of the game, all those things come into play. But the reason I say it varies so much by player. So for example, let's say someone like him that was a flat shooter. My experience has been the flat shooters are a little harder to change because they've just shot millions of shots at that flat trajectory. And so when you think about the shoulder position now, it just feels tighter. I've got to go up. I got to get my release point up higher. The players that shoot too high, and there's certainly a lot of those out there as well, especially female players, it seems like it's easier for them to lower their arc. They don't have that tightness in the shoulder. It's just a simple thing to do. And they have like pretty immediate results.
Sure.
And then you'll have some players that maybe their arc is in the mid 40s or it's close to the correct arc and that type thing. And then, but they're inconsistent. They shoot a 41, then a 51. Well, that averages, 46 or 45, but it's not a really good consistent arc. Another quick one to tell you a story on is Anthony Tolliver. When AT at the end of his career was playing with the Pistons, when I first met him, he actually serves on our advisory board now. And he had the best run of his career during this last 15, 20 games after he had started working with Noah. And, he had an average arc of like 42 to 43. And you look at that, so that's pretty close to ideal, right? Well, about the best a player can shoot is plus or minus 2-3 degrees. And when you get in the games and you have defense, that variation goes up even more. Yeah. So what was happening with Anthony is he would have a ton of shots at 42, 43, and some 44s, but he also would have some 38s and 39s when he got tired. And that's when the rim just starts closing up. And so that's really what we're trying to do. This, if you're at 45, you can be 2 or 3 degrees flat or 2 or 3 degrees high and still have good enough control over the ball and enough space for the ball to score. And when you're off of those ideals, if you're shooting 42, that means you're going to have some in the 30s. That closes up. If I'm shooting 48, 49, that means I'm going to have a lot in the 50s, which the ability to control in the 50s is really tough to do. The physics just starts working against you.
Oh, sure. So when you mentioned that it's easier for players to go from like a high arc to a more perfect one, does that relate to like height at all or anything like that? Or have you found through your studies that it's just however people are kind of trained to shoot, that's just how they shoot?
No, there's definitely a connection between height and trajectory. Now here's as a rule of thumb, tall players shoot flatter.
Yep.
And that's not a surprise. The big 7-foot guys, I've asked multiple 7'2" players that I've got the opportunity to work with over the years and said, why do you think you shoot it so flat? And I can remember a particular player telling me, I feel like I can just push it right over in the basket.
Oh, yeah.
And, and if you think about it from their standpoint, they're a foot taller than me. It does look a lot different. So it's about their view of the rim. Now, also, as you go to the other extreme, we've done a lot of testing, especially early on, 20 years ago, of a bunch of kids. What do you think kids do? They all shoot it in the 50s because their brain is telling them, man, I've really got to get that ball up there high for it to score. And so they do the opposite. So, we have seen, especially you take a 5-foot female player, they might shoot 52, 53 degrees. Same thing. Their brain's telling them, I got to really shoot it high. Now, there's short players that shoot flat and tall players that shoot too high and all that. The general rule of thumb, we have the data, nearly 1 billion shots. The taller the player is, the flatter their arc is. The shorter the player, the higher their arc is.
I mean, it makes sense. I just, again, it must be fun to just kind of see all of the data support what people have just kind of thought for years and years.
It's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, as an example, there's still people out there that are teaching this, not many at the highest level anymore, but if you're training a player to swish every shot, you're training them to miss short. Yeah, just completely flush that. There's 2 types of guaranteed scores. I always got to get this in anytime I'm on anything. Is swish, number 1, and the second one is what we call a Brad shot. Stands for back rim and down. Watch games coming up this week, and look how often at this level, especially, the made shots hit the back of the rim. Because if the top half of the ball hits the back of the rim, it's going to score. Okay. And again, it's going to count the same as if it was a swish. And so, we've really, especially as we got all the data and we start sharing that back with teams, that's now a given. Everybody focuses on getting the ball deep in the basket. We found generally that's the biggest cardinal sin in shooting.
It's funny because I remember 25 years ago when I was starting, basketball journey as a elementary school, middle schooler. And it was aim at the front of the rim and try and get a swish. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Dante DiVincenzo, who's unfortunately out for the rest of the year now. I mean, when you're watching him shoot in practice or you're watching him shoot in a game, it is a lot of just the back rim barely touches the net and then comes kind of spiking down. And it's such a hard transition for people my age, I think, to comprehend that. But when you watch people shoot, you're absolutely right. It is not swishes.
Here's a little bit of data for you. So at the NBA level and the Division I college level, the data is almost identical. Even at that level, players miss short 1.95 times more often, so almost twice as often as they miss long. So even at that level, at the high school level, that number is between 3 and 5. And so, and it's interesting also as well as, in the NBA, almost every player is between 43 and 47 degrees. There's a few exceptions and they're not great shooters. Yeah. But at the high school level, that number's, 1 out of 10 or something. And it's just, they have they get the biggest bang for the buck with Noah because they've just got players that are all over the place. And when you get the NBA, they're great shooters. We get all that. We didn't suddenly make the world a better, players can shoot, players have talent, all those type things. What we do is we do help a lot of players that aren't shooting as well. Like I mentioned Okora earlier, there's so many stories like that of players that have been able to get their 3-point percentage up from 32 to 38, and that's a meaningful difference. Or get their free throw shooting up. We've taken so many bad post players that were bad free throw shooters and got them at least to 70%. So it's a more serviceable percentage. But that's what's fun for us is watching that light go off and watching the player really get it and put in the work and get the results.
Absolutely. I did want to, I didn't have it on our outline. So pulling back the curtain a little bit, I'm surprising John with this one. So I apologize ahead of time, but any work or studies that you guys have done on like bank shots or off the backboard type of research, or is that
I personally have not
in the shooting world?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Because there's, I love looking at every piece of shooting, and the bank shot's a really good shot. I think teams are losing a few points by not using it more. Mm-hmm. There is a professor named Dr. Larry Silverberg at North Carolina State. He and an associate have done some really good research around, and we've worked with them over the years. Great guys, smart guys, and they actually not only did a paper on bank shots, but they also invented a product on.
Really?
And hasn't really just kind of used it in their place for testing and all this type stuff. But we have one installed here at our gym just for the heck of it. But basically what they found is, as you know, the short wing shot, that's the one shot that people do tend to use the bank shot.
Mm-hmm.
And the data in his study shows clearly there's a significant increase. The thing that people don't know, and this is what, I'm still trying to find a test case to do this. But, as players go kind of right down the center of the lane and, they're between the, just between the circle and the free throw line, what do they shoot right there when they're coming through the lane? They're going to shoot a floater.
Yep.
And the NBA analytics people tell me that's the most inefficient shot in basketball is that floater. Looks great when it goes in, looks great. And it does make it, it's coming in the rim steep and it's soft and all those things. But, Dr. Siddleberg's simulations show that there's just as big of an advantage from there to go to the top of the square as it is from the short wing. And it's interesting for me as, when I was a player, back then we were always taught, get the ball at the top of the square. There were no floaters, There were no whatever. You better get it to the top of the square. And that kind of became a go-to shot for me as I got in the heart of the lane. I would get it to the top of the square. And it seemed like once I got it off clean, it was just like an automatic. I felt like it was going to score. And so let me say this quickly, why the bank shot's better. So what happens is, when you shoot over 45 degrees, you start losing control essentially. And every degree that you shoot higher, that spray pattern at the rim just gets higher and higher. So imagine trying to hit the ceiling and then trying to hit it. You can't control it. It's the same thing. It's just, it gets wider and wider. So you can't really shoot a 55, 60 degree arc. When you shoot a bank shot, what happens is you hit that point on the square, the backboard deadens the ball and it comes into the rim at a steeper angle. And so what happens is you essentially get the results of shooting a really high arc without having to shoot a really high arc, if that makes sense. The ball's coming into the rim really steep, and you don't have to shoot it super steep coming into the backboard. So you can still really control it. You can hit that spot on the square or obviously off the top corner or whatever. And the ball's coming in really steep, so it has a much greater chance to score. So at some point, we could say I told you here. At some point, I believe players and teams will figure that out, and you're going to see guys getting in the heart of the lane and taking the ball to the top of the square.
I want to say it was I wrote about it like 2.5, maybe even 3 years ago now, when Ant had started to say that he's going to start going bank shot and glass more. And really the only reason I could come to of why more players aren't doing it is like, it doesn't look as cool, which unfortunately with NBA players, I've found a lot of it is flash and looking cool, but I agree with you. At some point, the data is going to be overwhelming and people are going to start doing it. Like, it's just a matter of time.
I'll email you that story. You might want to flip. I mean, I keep saying story. It's a research paper. I'll email you that research paper, Dr.
No, I would love that if you could. I would be fascinated.
Some graphics in there that you might want to use. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Last thing I just wanted to touch on before I get you out of here is just, we've talked about kind of the AI, the facial recognition side of it. We've talked a little bit about like how it helps older shooters, but like what's the future for Noah? I know you said a few times that high school, is that kind of where you want to get this product?
Essentially what we've done the last few years is we've really focused on the top part of the game because of the technology wasn't easy. We got to get in ceilings, we got to have lifts, we got to do all those. That's not a big deal to an NBA or a college team, but for a high school team, that's a big deal. And so we've been kind of biding our time, waiting on tech to get better, to be able to do things more affordable and an easier installation. So we introduced a product about 2 years ago. It's called the Noah Backboard System, and it takes about 30 minutes to install. And you plug it up, and you're running. And it's NBA level data, no facial recognition, none of that super advanced stuff. But you can get the arc depth left, right. You can get the feedback. You get everything on your app. Really, really cool product. So that's really taken off for us, and that's been great. I also still have a really strong interest in understanding why some players are better than others when it comes to shooting. And so I mentioned this motion capture system we've built, and we have 3 NBA teams installed there. So we're now really combing through that data to understand all the insights. Like, for example, I mean, just as an example, someone says you got to keep your elbow in, got to get your elbow into the ball. And that's really important. But a lot of people don't get their elbow into the ball until later in the shot. Is that still okay? Does that affect percentage? Does the shot base, does so many different things, how a player loads, how they drop their butt, how they get ready to shoot. We're monitoring all of those things now 60 times a second. And so what's going to be really fun is to go back and look at and say, okay, on all the shots that missed over 5 inches to the left, what's different? What broke down during that shot process? So those are the things that still drives me. I want all the answers, Andrew. I don't want just some of the answers. I want all the answers. And so this is like a really anticipated year for me because we now have a lot of data to start working through and working with these teams. And so it's just going to be a lot of fun. The other thing that we're doing a lot of work right now, in fact, I'll be in the gym this afternoon. We've got some time set aside to look at some of the stuff our guys have been doing, but we're doing some stuff with AI glasses now. Okay. And so, there's a lot of things in ball sports when it comes to head stability, all of those type things that you can't get that any other way, but the glasses are awesome. And so, you can actually, so now instead of just recording that 3-second video from the hoop looking back, now we're recording a video looking the other direction to see what the player's focus is and seeing how steady their head was. Does that change for players that don't shoot as well as players that do shoot as well? And, it's some really interesting things, we're already seeing. I mean, like one of the best shooters, and we have a bunch of former college players and stuff here. The guy's probably the best shooter in our building. We also were looking at their where the backboard is in the center of their field of view in the glasses.
Yeah.
And his is always to the left, but he shoots it really, really straight.
For Pete's sake.
And now he's right-handed and, and is probably right eye dominant.
Yeah.
And he's tilted just a tad to get more lined up with that right eye. You look at a Kevin Durant that brings the ball way over here. Caitlin Clark does that to a certain degree as well. Are those players left eye dominant? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Me, on the other hand, I'm a weird guy. I'm right-handed, but left eye dominant. And so interestingly, and I'm a pretty decent shooter, but the backboard, my focus is a little bit to the right of the rim.
Huh.
And so that's just some of the kind of things that we're going to learn as we get all this point of view data. And we're also we're able to do some things as far as ball tracking with glasses and things like that. So really the mechanic side of thing, we want to continue to get more and more granular at the end of the day. We don't want to leave any stone unturned, as far as what it means. This part about the data, the 45-11-0, that's done. It's proven. Everybody's good. And that is so that basically what we've been doing is providing that feedback, providing that data, and then leave it up to the shooting coaches and the players, and the people they work with to make those changes. And now we're trying to take it a little bit further and give them even more help, give them even more data to understand, this player's definitely got a problem with this or that. And we just need more data to do that. We'll hit 1 billion shots this year, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Basketball shots collected since really just since 2017.
1 billion shots, and you're still going for more answers. I gotta respect that.
Yeah, I always joke when I speak at coaching clinics. I always tell people, I'm a pretty smart guy when I have the answers to the test. Otherwise, pretty average. And so there's still other answers out there that I need, that the basketball world needs, that we are, bound and determined to find them.
I mean, I can't wait. The AI glasses part of it is really interesting to me, of seeing where people focus when they're shooting. Because again, like when I was taught how to shoot 25 years ago, it was always front of the rim. You look at one of the little basket hooks and you try and hoist it up above that. And how it has changed, and the data that you're going to get from, like, I even imagine, like, generationally, you're going to start seeing differences in data of, like, where people are looking based off of age, which fascinating. I could talk about it all day, but John, I know you're busy. I want to thank you so much for coming on. For people that want to find out more information about NOAA, where could they go to find out more information?
Yeah, the best place is go to our website. It's just noaabasketball.com. So go there, join one of our webinars, fill out a website inquiry. It'll get routed to the right sales guy, and they'll get in touch with you. But no, check it out. Go to the Science of Shooting tab. It'll have some of the details of the stuff we talked about here today if someone's interested.
And one last shout out for Anthony Tolliver, a 2-time Timberwolf. There's quite a few of them out there, but gotta show him some love for coming back to Minnesota towards the end of his career. John, again, thank you so much. For everyone that tuned in, I appreciate all of you. I will be back after game 2 of the Spurs to do another post-game live stream. But John, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew.